just a little bit about that trip because it actually ties in a little bit with the homily this evening. When I landed in Haiti, I immediately got into a car. The mission had someone there waiting at the airport who brought me to the mission. And I thought for some reason that the mission was very near the airport. And we arrived 3 hours later. At one point I thought I might be getting kidnapped, but I wasn't sure. The driver didn't speak any English at all, so we just kind of sat there, and it ended up being a really powerful thing because when I first pulled out of the airport, there were a bunch of different tents and stuff in slums, so to speak, just different little huts made out of tarp and so forth, and the type of thing that you see on the news. And I thought, had I only gone a little bit, I probably would have thought, oh well, that's the exception. I just must have seen a really bad side of town. But the same thing played itself out for 3 hours. As we went from town to town to town, trash in the streets, people living, in very dire circumstances, a car itself being a very rare thing, most of the people walking around, lots of poverty. And getting to see that then for 3 hours and kind of having that, and again, not being able to speak to the driver, just kind of sat there and took this all in. And it was a very, very humbling and very powerful experience. And one obviously that you can't unremember. And getting to see a situation where probably, as we were driving, I was realizing, literally every single item in the rectory or in your home would be considered a luxury. Literally, down to if you have a paper clip or a rubber band in your house, luxury. I mean, the type of poverty that is there, and then the realization that A, this is how it is all over the country, and then B, the realization that this is how most of the other countries in the world live. Over half of the world lives on less than $2 a day. The average Haitian eats a piece of pizza's worth of calories per day. And I got that reinforced and reminded of that. The mission that I visited was really the lone bright spot that I saw in my entire travels through Haiti. It was an amazing place. It was certainly not something that most of us would find comfortable per se, but it was still compared to the other things that we saw. There was running water. No hot water, but there was running water and a sewage system and so forth. It was an amazing kind of little miraculous hub of activity and work. They feed over and teach and educate about 1,200 youngsters from K through 6th grade for $30 a year per student. That is the meal that they provide during their lunchtime is the one meal that most of those kids get during the day. In my first day there, I got to actually hand out the meals to the kids, which was I didn't feel really good about that. It was like they were having to come to me for food, but anyways, they just said, here, just jump in the line and just do this. And so every kid comes up every day, and before they get their meal, you hold the food out to them, and then they put their hands around it, and then they say, in their own language, they say, "Thank you, Jesus." And then they go and eat. And it was funny. Even though I didn't speak one word of their language, of Haitian Creole, kids are kids. And when you've been in a school situation, there were a couple of other kids as the older kids started to come through, and that you could tell they were kind of like envelope pushers, like every other kid in every other country. And so they kind of would look around and they would see if their teacher was around, and then they would say in English, "Thank you." And then they would smile real big and look at their buddies like they just got away with something, because they spoke in English, to the crazy white visitor who was here. So it was really neat. And then they have recess, so they're out playing, and I play the same games that our kids play, and had a ball. There was a soccer field and so forth. But that was just one aspect of the mission. The mission is also, in addition to educating, is teaching the local people how to farm, and they are farming on the mission themselves, raising crops and animals. They go out and they build 60 houses a year for the local community. I went out on a few truck drives and a few house building projects, and most of the people in that area, if they had a house, it was made out of the walls were dirt and they were crumbling. And so this mission was out building, and they can build a home for $5,500, a concrete house with a concrete slab and a nice metal roof that keeps all of the heat, a lot of the heat out that the other ones do not. They also provide microloans to try and get the economy jump-started. I mean, most of the economy right now is farming, so they go out and they provide little loans to these organizations, and it's really neat. Another thing that this mission does is they employ a local people. There was one priest who was there, Father Glenn Moe, and he was a southern guy from Louisiana, and he had a thick Cajun accent from Louisiana, but he's there, and he helped found the mission and runs it. Everybody else that works there, the guy, the business manager, and all of the employees, and the home builders, and the teachers, and the principal, and so on and so forth, are employed by the mission. So the mission helps fund local people, and it was just, I guess, to sum it all up. I mean, I could talk for hours, but the Catholic, what I saw, there were lots of other organizations doing work. There's, the United Nations and USAID and the Red Cross and a lot of other different things down there. The only people who are doing it right, this is what you hear when you talk to people, is the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is the only answer to actually, and is the only one that's combating the poverty, because they've been there. That's what the people would tell me. The Church has been here from way back when, and we didn't just come because there was an earthquake. We were here, and we're doing it the right way in terms of cultivating solutions from using the local people, and doing it that way, and teaching, and we're not just coming in, and they say, there's all these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations that will come in and try and do this project or that project, or do this or that, but they say they'll come and they go. They come in, they try and do something that doesn't work, and then they leave. But the Church has been there on the ground for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, even sometimes. And so it was just a really affirming thing. It was a really awesome opportunity to see the Church in its poverty, in its material poverty, but also not just its material poverty, but the wealth of joy that was present and all of the other aspects that were there as well. The reason I bring that up is because it actually leads into something that I think that took place a few weeks ago. Pope Francis released in early February his message to all Catholics for Lent. Now, the Church has a history up until the Second Vatican Council of having what's called, this is a long word, Septuagesima, which means 70 days. So 70 days before Easter, they would have basically pre-Lent. You know how you before you go for a run, you do some stretching? Well, this was like Lent stretching. You would start to think about Lent for 30 days leading up to Lent. Because I know, and it makes sense to me when I heard about it, because I knew most of my life as a teenager and stuff, it was like I'd wake up Ash Wednesday and be like, oh, it's Lent. What will I give up? And then I'd look around the house till I saw something I didn't like, and then I would give that up, Oh, well, I'm giving up wheat thins, Lent isn't supposed to sneak up on us. It's not supposed to just pop up and appear. And so even though we don't have that 30-day period anymore, it's still been a tradition of the popes to release a message to kind of get people ready a few weeks before Lent. And so I wanted to focus a little bit on that tonight, because Pope Francis obviously talks a little bit about poverty in there for Lent. And he based his reflection on 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9. Where it says, St. Paul says that Jesus became poor. He became poor so that by his poverty you might become rich. Jesus became poor. And the focus of Pope Francis is that on Jesus' choosing it when he didn't have to. He could have come in any way that he wanted. He's Jesus. But he chose to come. He could have come as the prince of whatever, or the king of, or he could have been a Roman emperor. He could have been the president of the United States or the king of England. But he chose to come in the way he did. He didn't just spin a wheel and be like, okay, I wonder how I'm going to come to earth. Spin the wheel. Oh, okay, I'll be a poor carpenter. No, he chose that. He chose to come as a poor person. He chose poverty. He, in all of his glory and all of his greatness, he sought out and intentionally became poor. And so Pope Francis then throws the gauntlet down for us as Catholics and says, Lent this year, his challenge to us is to also choose to become poor when we don't have to. We are obviously very blessed. We know that. We don't have to become poor. We don't have to live poor. But Pope Francis is inviting us this Lent, in whatever way that means for you, to somehow embrace and choose to live poorly even though you don't need to. And precisely in ways that you don't need to become poor, he's challenging us to imitate Jesus' sacrifice and to become poor ourselves. Pope Francis talks about poverty has an evangelical nature. What he means by that is when people see poverty, when we live it, and also when people see it in us, it changes us and them. When we were coming home from Haiti, all 3 of my flights got canceled. It was just like, really? You know, I get to the airport in Haiti, yeah, flight's been canceled. We got one for you in 7 hours. It's like, great. But then they actually found one that left 3 minutes earlier than my original one. I was like, yeah, I'll take that one. But then I get to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Oh, your flight to Chicago, it's been canceled. So I got to wait around for a few hours. Got to Chicago. Yeah, your flight's in Indianapolis. This has been canceled. And so literally, I got in at like 12:30 at night, you know. And there was a bunch of us standing around the gate in Chicago O'Hare to try to get to Indianapolis. And I mean, it was like riot scenes, you know. I mean, it was like I was kind of nervous for the flight attendant lady, you know, who was taking off. I just kind of sat back and I was like, you know, it just didn't seem right to complain. After I'd seen all the stuff that I had seen, I'm like, am I really going to get upset because I'm getting home at midnight and not 7? And after everything that I saw, it just seemed ridiculous, really, to get bent out of shape. When we choose poverty, when we live poverty, when we start to realize all the things that we've been blessed with, that changes us. It makes it easier to be a Christian. That's why Jesus chose it. He chose poverty because he was wanting us to choose poverty, because he knows that when we do, it's easier for us to love. And it's easier for us to be Christian. So do you or will you accept and become poor this Lent? What are the ways that you can do that? If you wait till Ash Wednesday morning, you're probably not going to think of any good ideas. But if you spend the next 10 days kind of praying about that, asking God, you know, hey, what are some ways, Lord, that I could choose poverty, that I could become poor? What are some things that I can give up besides candy? You know, what's something I can give up besides chocolate? Or the same old things that I always do? What are some ways that I could really become poor and embrace that poverty? Pope Francis said, finally, I'll just read a quick quote from his address. He said, Lent is a fitting time for self-denial. We would do well to ask ourselves, what can we give up in order to help and enrich others by our own poverty? This is a great line I love. Let us not forget that real poverty hurts. You know, so if we're looking for what's the thing that I can give up that will cause me the least amount of pain, like I did when I was 10, then it won't work. Pope Francis is challenging us and throwing the gauntlet down. Let us not forget that real poverty hurts. No self-denial is real without this dimension. He says, I distrust a charity that costs nothing and does not hurt. What is the Lent and sacrifice or sacrifices that you are going to make that will allow you to experience some small piece of poverty so that both you can be transformed and those that you meet and those who see you, and indeed the entire world, may be transformed as well?